We just have to remember to turn them off at the end of the show. This is the last weekly episode of Activate Live. We'll be going to an as-needed basis. You know, as it warrants, we'll have special editions. 1 minute. Roll it. Coming up, why we all need to fill out the U.S. Census, plus working while black. What does that mean? What does it feel like? And how does the union help? Next on Activate Live.
Activate your voice! Activa tu voz! Activate it now!
Speak up, speak out.
Get involved, get involved.
Engage-toi.
Take action!
Aktiviere deine Stimme.
We're union and we're proud.
Welcome to the last weekly episode of Activate Live. We'll be going to an as-needed basis after today. I'm Tanya Hutchins with the Machinist Union's Communications Department, coming to you from our headquarters in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. If my count is correct, this is the 157th episode of Activate Live. We'll get to our census interview in just a moment. But first, more than 4,000 members of IAM Local S6 entered their second week on strike at Bath Iron Works in Maine. They're fighting for a fair contract with strong seniority provisions, affordable health care, and no outsourcing. Bath Iron Works is a division of General Dynamics. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement takes effect today. The agreement is considered a new version of the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA 2.0. While the USMCA improves some labor protections compared to the previous NAFTA agreement, the IAM considers it flawed because it lacks adequate labor standards, enforcement, and other reforms that would curtail outsourcing of aerospace and manufacturing jobs. Well, it's Canada Day, the anniversary of the date in 1867 when the Constitution Act took effect. Back then, it was called the British North America Act, which united 3 separate colonies into a single dominion within the British Empire, called Canada. Before that, the provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick were separate. Canada Day was originally called Dominion Day, but it was renamed in 1982. Celebrations are taking place throughout the country and the world, so happy Canada Day to all of our Canadian members of the IAM. Well, you probably heard by now that 2020 is a census year. The count takes place every 10 years. But have you filled out the census yet? It just takes a few minutes. To help us understand why the census is so important to our communities, Kaile Bower joins us from the U.S. Census Bureau. Thank you so much for joining us, Kaile.
Hi, Tanya. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, the Census Bureau makes an effort to make sure that everyone is counted. So how important is it, and how important is that when it comes to resources and the economy?
Yeah, Tanya, the census is one of the most important things you can do this year. So the way I like to talk about it is the census is about 2 main things. It's about power and it's about money. So when you fill out your census form, you are getting counted for that, and those numbers turn into how many representatives your state gets in Congress. Your state gets the power it deserves from you being counted. And when we talk about money, by filling out your census form, you're helping your community get its share of over $675 billion every year in federal funding that's distributed based on this once-a-decade critical count.
So as for community planning, I know we're having a little bit trouble hearing you, but I'm hearing you better now. Billions of dollars are allocated. So what is at stake?
So at stake is over 100 programs that rely on this once-a-decade count. So we're talking about funds for transportation, for healthcare, health clinics, Medicare, for schools, the school lunch program. And if you think that, I know around me, a lot of the public schools have trailers outside of them. And you think, how does this happen? Why are our kids learning in these trailers? Well, they're learning there because we didn't have an accurate count last decade for this next 10 years. By filling this out, you can help the school systems across the country plan better for the resources that they need. So it's the numbers that we collect this year will last for the next 10 years. That's a long time. There's no do-overs. So we really need you to get out and help shape your community's future for these next 10 years.
Now, I know there may be some misconceptions out there. What questions do you ask?
Yeah, so this 2020 census is a really easy form. We're going to ask for your name. We're going to ask how many people are in your household. And then we're going to ask some questions about the people in the household. So we're going to ask how old they are. What are their birthdays? We're going to ask if you own or rent the home you're living in. And then we're going to ask about relationships to the homeowner. So is it a spouse? Is it a parent, child? All of the different relationships. And then we also ask about race and ethnicity. We absolutely do not ask about your citizenship. We do not ask for Social Security numbers. We do not ask for bank information, and we will never ask for any political information.
So how many ways are there to fill out the census? Because I know you're making different ways available. It's not just by mail.
Absolutely. 2020 is an exciting year for us because it's the first time you have 3 modes of response. You can fill it out online if you go to 2020census.gov. You can fill it out over the phone. We have call contact centers across the country and in 13 different languages. And then you can fill it out by paper if you are not comfortable either over the phone or by internet.
What about confidentiality?
Confidentiality is a big deal to us. So as an agency, we will not disclose your information to any other federal agency, including immigration. We will not disclose your information to any law enforcement agencies, and we will not even disclose your information to any landlords or local governments. We take an oath as employees of the Census Bureau to protect that information, and we can be punished by fines and jail time if we do disclose that information. So the confidentiality and security is really baked into our culture at Census, and we take it very seriously.
So I know there are a lot of important dates to keep in mind. What is the timeline moving forward? Because today's July 1st.
Right, I can't believe it's already July. So we started this back in March when we started mailing out census invitations across the country. And depending on if you responded or not, you could have gotten up to 5 different invitations from us. Right now, we're starting to get into the field for some certain operations. We have one that we called Update Leave, and we're almost done. We're so close. And that is where if you live in a household that does not receive mail from the U.S. Postal Service, we as census takers will come out and drop that information off to you at your door. That is your invitation to respond. It includes information on how to respond by the internet, over the phone, and it includes a paper questionnaire. We also, though, count not only households, but we count what, and this is a very census term, it's called group quarters. So that's an easy way for us to reference these larger living arrangements where groups of adults that are unrelated live together in a facility that is administered by an individual, an organization, or an entity. So if you think about college dorms, prisons, nursing homes, any of those large living group situations. And now, beginning in July, is when we are starting to go out to those institutions and organizations that have chosen to not respond via electronic response, and we will gather those responses. That happens from starting now through September. Also, beginning in mid-July, we're starting a couple of our early soft launch of our non-response follow-up operation. So that is what it sounds like. To the households that haven't responded yet, we are going to send census takers out to assist those households in responding. We really do everything we can to get correct numbers across the entire country. Now, the bulk of the non-response follow-up field operations will happen beginning in the second week in August, and that will go through the end of October. The end date for data collection for us is Halloween, October 31st. So we are pushing as hard as we can to get as close as we can to 100% response. Right now, we're at just over 60, between 60 and 70%. And so we've gotten a good chunk of the work done. And now we're really reaching out to those people that haven't been comfortable doing it on their own. They may require a little assistance from us, and we're going to be there to help.
Great. Anything else you'd like to mention, Kaile? What did we miss?
Let's see. I want to reiterate once again how absolutely important it is for everyone to go out and fill out the census. If you've already filled it out, thank you so much. We absolutely appreciate you. If you haven't and you have some reservations about it, please take some time to visit our website at www.2020census.gov. And there you'll get answers to all sorts of questions you may have. We have language guides and videos that are available up into 59 languages. So we cover 99% of the language needs of the country in helping people to fill out their form either online or by paper. And if you are more comfortable talking to someone and calling it through, our census questionnaire assistance representatives are there to assist you from 9 a.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern Time.
Thank you so much, Kaile Bower from the U.S. Census. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Well, have you filled out the census yet? Let us know right here on this video, no matter which social media platform you're watching. You can activate your voice on Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, or YouTube. Well, one of the great things about being union is that it's the great equalizer. Union members make more money than non-union members due to the strength of our collective bargaining power. In a report last month, the Economic Policy Institute found that 1 in 5 black people in this country lives below the poverty line. That's below about $26,000 annual income from a family of 4. And that's for black workers that have jobs. Another API stat, black workers are more likely to be unemployed than white workers at every level of education. So you can see why many see a good union job as leveling the playing field in terms of livable wages and good benefits. But not all workplaces are created equal, and no workplace is immune to racism. Fortunately, we have tools in place to fight back and defend ourselves when we believe wrongdoing has occurred. Today, we're going to talk about how to fight anti-black racism the union way. We have 2 guests, Steve Cooper and Jim Price, both recent retirees, less than 24 hours ago. We begin with Steve, who joins us from, are you in California, Steve?
Yes, I am.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And just to set the stage, tell us how long you have been a member of the IAM and where did you join?
Well, Tanya, I've been a member of the IAM for 38 years, approximately 38 years. And I started my membership, if you will, in Tucson, Arizona. And Tucson, Arizona is Southwest community. At that time, it was 3% black. And, at the shop that I worked in was predominantly white. Tucson is about approximately 73% white. And so, I was exposed in the work environment to, it was a new environment for me because I moved to Arizona from Detroit. But by the way, thanks for having me on here and giving me an opportunity to share. Um, but
And this is your young photo.
Yeah, that was me. I was actually at the plant there. We were doing some fundraising, some community fundraising. But yeah. So this topic, though, I think is real timely, given what's going on around the country, the protest that's going on as a result of the George Floyd incident, and how it's heightened the awareness of the the racial divide, if you will, in this country. And not only that, I think it's been a misunderstanding of races, of cultures, if you will. And that translates also into the workplace.
That's true.
So,
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, what have you seen? What has your experience been with racism in the shop?
well, let me just give you an example of an incident that took place with me, and it may help others understand how we can possibly deal with this issue. When I first started my career as a young DBR, I was thrust into the position. A lot of us are. Sometimes, we don't have any psychological background or social science degrees or anything like that. And so we're asked to go in and deal with people, deal with a lot of issues around people. And so when I came in, I wanted to be a leader of diversity. I wanted to make sure we were inclusive, that we had women involved, that we had more minorities, more blacks involved, more Latinos involved. And so we started creating committees, and we developed a women's committee in the shop, and I thought which was a good thing. And so I asked the women to take on issues that dealt with uh, women-related issues in the shop, so we could help the negotiating committee understand what some things that we could possibly do. So long story short, the women came back to me and they said, "Well, Steve, we'd like to do a diaper drive." And I was like, "Huh? A diaper drive? That's not what I asked you guys to do. We're supposed to be focusing on organizing, on contract negotiations." And they left the meeting kind of shaking their heads like, "Wow, this guy don't get it." And so as a result of that, they filed a complaint against me for being sexist and being for gender discrimination. And I was shocked. I was surprised because I thought I was actually very inclusive. I thought I was the kind of guy that wouldn't be labeled as any type of sexist, racist, or whatever. Um, but I felt that actually something must be going on here. Something must be wrong. So I agreed to have the women's committee department director come out and meet with all of us and mediate a discussion with these women because clearly I didn't get it. I really thought I was doing right by telling them no diaper drive. Let's focus on contract negotiations and organizing. And so after the women's committee director came out. This was early on back in the 90s, and she created. We did a roundtable discussion. We had open, honest dialogue, and we talked about what women's issues were. Diapers. I didn't know that there was in the community there was a lot of young mothers that needed diapers. Diapers were really expensive. I didn't know that some of the mothers in our local had young daughters and granddaughters that needed diapers. I didn't know that women had issues in the shop, in a shop that was designed by men and created by men. It was a manufacturing shop. Um, and I didn't know that the women wanted to build a community for our local lodge. I
So
was
you
just solely focused.
so you had two different ideas that were coming together, and this turned out to be a learning experience for you.
Yes, it was. But here's my point that I make with that. Um, because I didn't understand them. And this is what happens with blacks in the workplace, and usually it's predominantly white leadership, whether it be in the union or whether it be in management. We don't understand each other because we haven't had that dialogue. And after having that dialogue with the women, because those women were almost like foreign to me. I didn't know all these things about women at that time. I was just becoming into that leadership role. And as a leader, it's incumbent upon you to learn about who you're leading, and which is what I did. And which is from that point on, from that time on, it taught me the importance of understanding people that didn't look like me, that didn't walk like me, that didn't talk like me. Uh, that was a very eye-opening experience for me. And so I took that and started making a conscious decision to talk to the Muslim folks that was working in our shop, to talk to more Latinos that was working in our shop, to talk to more white guys that was working in our shop. Because I was in my comfort zone too. You know, I like being around other blacks because we have a lot more in common in terms of our culture and food. But we also had, uh, with the other workers, we had a lot more in common when you sit down and talk to people. And I've experienced this numerous times. When you sit down and talk to people, you find that you have a lot more in common than the surface leads you to believe. When you look at a person and you look at their skin color and you look at what they're wearing. Another example is a brother that I met at the Whipping Singer Center who was wearing a Habib. And, I made a conscious decision to reach out and start talking to him. And guess what? I learned so much. I mean, this guy, he knew a lot about the grievance procedure, about our contract. I had stereotyped him, which is what we do a lot because he was wearing a Habib. And we stereotype people based on their skin color. We stereotype people based on their religion. And that's not the way in which, as a union, we're supposed to conduct ourselves. That was my personal experience. So I know from experience that when we reach out to others, and this is what I would ask all of our leadership to do, reach out to others and try to learn and understand people that don't look like you and people that don't walk like you, people that don't talk like you. And you're going to discover and find that you have a lot more in common than the surface would lead you to believe.
One of the things we have in common is the collective bargaining agreement. Do you think that
Correct.
levels the playing field for black workers?
It's a good question, Tanya. The collective bargaining agreement, it does create some level of equality for workers. As a matter of fact, that was a big part of Martin Luther King's message was economic equality. Become part of a labor union. Become part of the movement, because that way you know what your wage is going to be when you go into the shop. If it's in a collective bargaining agreement, you know what the benefits are going to be. It's going to be the same as that white guy or that Latino guy that's working next to you in that shop. Here's the problem, though. When it comes to racial discrimination and racial um, grievances or violations, the collective bargaining agreement isn't always equally applied and enforced. And it's because of systemic racism in a lot of cases. Management has built in certain rules and regulations within their policies that are discriminatory. And if we don't have, if our leadership isn't looking for those kind of things within the collective bargaining agreement or even within our own union, they're not going to find them because you have to get out of your comfort zone sometimes. And when you're enforcing that agreement and making sure that it's being applied equally with people that don't look like you, that don't walk like you, that don't talk like you, because you may misunderstand some of their emotions and some of the ways in which they interact at work. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have a valid complaint. So yes, it does level the playing field when it comes to wages and benefits, but sometimes it's not applied and enforced equally.
Why is it so important then to make sure that we keep records of and notes of incidents of racial discrimination or harassment?
Oh, it's very important. I've had an opportunity, and unfortunately, to do some um, preliminary investigations of complaints of racial discrimination in the workplace, and and most times they're valid. But the problem is, uh, there wasn't any documentation taken. So what I would recommend to any worker out there who feel like they're being discriminated against, who feel like there's racism on the job and there's racial bias on the job, to document it. Start writing down dates, times, names, places, interactions with the supervisor. What was the issue? Was it a promotional issue or was it a work related issue? We all have a right to work in a harassment free environment. So that documentation is very important because it can also show a pattern. If there's a pattern that's developed, if we find other workers that other black workers that have experienced the same thing by the same department or by the same supervisor, we can show that pattern. We can have that pattern. It also helps when it comes to contract negotiations. We can show some things that we have observed over time that's been taking place in the workplace. So documentation is very, very important whenever you feel like you're being discriminated against.
Steve, some members may be hesitant to file grievances when it comes to racial discrimination. What are some things to remember when going through the process?
Well, I think with some things that you really want to remember is Title VII under the Civil Rights Act covers a lot of ground. It's not just discrimination based on race, gender, religion. It involves other workplace issues. So, for instance, if you feel like you're being stereotyped or you're being bypassed for a promotion, um, our representatives and even our members, a lot of times we have it in the contract where it talks about, we can't discriminate based on race, gender, religion, but it doesn't get into a lot of the details when it talks about promotional things and about uh, workers' rights and the collect under the um, company's policies. Like I said again, the stereotyping uh, and promotional issues that could lead into a situation where management is being discriminatory, but if we don't understand the law and we think, well, he's only doing it because I'm black, and a lot of times people think we're playing the race card when you hear that phrase that, well, it's only happening to me because I'm black. We can feel that. People that are being discriminated against, that are being harassed, we can feel it. We know when it's happening. Can we always document it? Can we always write it down? Sometimes we can't. But we still need to document that moment that it happened to us, that we felt that way. Because a lot of times that's going to be the difference. It's not necessarily that proof, but how you felt at the time. If, like those women, I go back to that story. Now, they felt and believed that I was harassed. I was not harassing, but I was discriminating against them and I was being sexist. And that's what mattered. I didn't believe that, but I was shown that, and I was proven that I was that way. But so it's important, I think, um, when we go down that road to um, to make sure that we're properly documenting it.
Steve, you have shared so much with us, and we appreciate it. I know you're only 24 hours in, but how does it feel to be retired?
Well, yeah, I'm only 24 hours in, so
Any
I don't
plans?
know that I felt that way today because I've been trying to prepare for your show here. But it feels great actually, to know that I have a union pension, and again, going back to how a collective bargaining agreement levels the playing field uh, for minorities. I'll be able to retire comfortably, and I don't have to worry about making sure that the ends are going to be met, that the bills are going to be paid, um, and it's going to be enjoyable. I'm going to get a chance to do some things, see my grandkids, do more of that, learn more about the game of golf. I got a lot of practicing to do on that. I'll be involved with our union on some level at different points in time. There's a lot of things. Home projects, of course, the honeydews are always going to be there. So, I'd like to just share something else before we closed out. And I know we were going to talk about parting words, and I do have some parting words. And I want to go back to the George Floyd incident and how it relates to the workplace as well. Um, this is big. I mean, hopefully some changes are going to take place. But a lot of people we've been claiming, and I'm black. I've been black all my life, so I'm part of the genre who's I've been discriminated against. I've faced some police harassment. But what I wanted to share in kind of closing here is that the George Floyd incident was very, very traumatic. But a lot of people, this has been going on for a long time, and a lot of people never believed it. Because we hear people, we hear in the workplace, the race cards are being played all the time. Oh, they're just crying. Oh, they're just bitching. But the same thing was said about police brutality. Nobody believed it when we've said that. And I've grown up in that environment. Until that video, and as a result of that video, uh, until that video surfaced, no one would have ever believed that. No one would have ever thought that the police would intentionally be out to kill and harass black people. That video proved that it was true, that everything that we've been saying in the past is true. So because and that's where I'm going back to the proof thing. Because there was no proof, it was never believed. We were never believed. Now that the proof is there, people believe it. So again, going back to the workplace, when someone comes to you as a leader, as a shop steward, and a lot of our shop stewards, especially the frontline stewards, don't have a degree in psychology, don't know anything about social science. They don't know how to handle racial discrimination. We have to teach them. We have a human rights class in the IAM. Damn good class. I learned so much in that class. I think every representative should take a human rights class because it exposes you to different cultures and helps you understand different people because we all have a common bond, but we all have different ways in which we express and we share that common bond. The union is common bond, but we have different cultures, we have different backgrounds, we have different ways in which we live our lives. So don't take it lightly when someone tells you that they're being discriminated against. That there's racial bias in the workplace because you have an experience. Sit down, talk to them, listen to them. We lost a brother to suicide in a shop that I was involved with because he didn't feel like he was ridiculed when he brought that particular issue to management that he was being discriminated against. He was ridiculed. He ended up killing himself. So this is a very serious situation. Listen, we have to listen to each other. We have to learn from each other, Tanya.
Good advice. You've given us a lot of great info, so thank you so much for taking out time of your first day of retirement to chat with us, Steve.
Thank you. I'm glad I could be of help.
And enjoy your retirement.
I will do that.
Well, you too can join the conversation. Let us know what you think about the grievance procedure and fighting anti-Black racism. Also, let us know if you consider yourself an ally, because there are growing allies these days, especially white allies in the shop who are speaking up and speaking out. We're going to move on now to our second recent retiree, Jim Price, who joins us from, I think, Bowie, Maryland. Is that right, Jim?
Yeah, the Price compound.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your day as well, one of your first days of
Not a problem.
retirement.
Tanya, before we get started, Tanya, I just got to say this. I really do. Steve Cooper, I've known him for a lot of years, and every time we've sat and talked, every time we've basically been at a and just started the conversations about what reps talk about, shops, issues of the day, such as racism and such as sexism. It never fails. He always impresses me, and I tell you what, it's kind of hard to follow that guy.
It is, but you can do it. Yes, he's a hard act to follow. And you
Yes, he is.
too have experience, just like Steve. You've been in a lot of shops, a lot of different areas with people of different backgrounds. Share with us, especially for some of the white workers that are watching, what is it like for a black worker working in an almost all-white shop?
In 1978, I hired in at McDonnell Douglas Electronics in St. Charles, Missouri. And you got to understand, I guess, sometimes just the culture of the area. You know, the Midwest. Steve's from Flint, Michigan. I'm from St. Louis. But St. Charles was one of those towns that basically you knew was more or less a sundown town. You know, you weren't supposed to be there after dark. And I, like Steve, and probably a lot of other sons of African American parents, were given that lesson. You know, if you ever get stopped by the police, or you're in your car, you make your hands available, you turn the lights on if it's at night, you know, and just basically make sure that you adhere to every command or order. That conversation still goes on today. But being in at the electronics company, coming in as a youngster, it was really somewhat frightening. And the only thing I guess that saved me was I had some experience with being the only one of the only two African Americans on a college campus. But going into the shop, you know, you stop to think. Well, you look at the people around and you say to yourself, "Do I really fit in? Do I really want to be here?" But it takes a little time, you know, to figure out all the folks that you're working with. You know, when you go into a shop as an African American male or female, you try to figure out which end is up. And that's not different than anybody else, a black, a brown, a white person going into a shop. I mean, but you just basically try to figure out where you are and who's who. Um, the shop I worked in out there in St. Charles, it was predominantly white. It was 60% women, as a matter of fact. That was another hurdle to get over. But it took a little time to basically get to a point where I actually met people that I could trust. Took some time to basically get used to the fact that, you know, there weren't a lot of people that looked like me. But those are things that we have to overcome in order to basically make sure that we survive this world. Um, it didn't hurt me; it helped me, I think, in a lot of ways because of the diversity that I brought to the table. I ended up being the shop steward. I ended up being the president of that local out there for about 12 years. Um, and it was an experience that I guess that basically, you know, in some cases it was not so good. In other cases it was a learning experience.
Now, you talked about a lot of different cases. You most recently worked with federal employees as the director of government employees. You know, during your 23-year career, what racial hardships have you seen occur in the workplace throughout your work?
I think that probably Steve hit it on the head is the not understanding, you know, that a contract may level the playing field, but it may not level the amount of justice that an individual gets. If you're a woman in the federal sector or African American or a person of color, the way that contract's applied makes a big difference. And in some cases, it can be applied specifically in the federal government as a tool to keep you down. I can't give you any specifics. I do know that it has happened. I've talked with some folks that work at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, and also people that work at some of the DOE facilities who, on some certain occasions, will come forward and say, you know, hey, look, I applied for this job, but they didn't give it to me. I'm qualified, but they picked someone else. And you have to stop and listen to that person, like Steve said. You got to listen to it. Okay, you start asking questions. Well, why do you think that there was anything racially motivated by that? And then, you know, you talk to them. You look at their credentials. Heck, you may even go and talk to the manager that basically is a part of that process, and that can insult them in some cases. But that's the thing, I guess, that we need to start doing. We need to start challenging a lot of the stuff that goes on like that, you know, whenever there's cases that way.
Well, you mentioned challenging. You know, as we pursue workplace justice, how much change happens by speaking up, speaking out, reporting behavior as
Lots.
opposed to just remaining silent and taking it?
Lots. uh, if you're going to get any change, you're going to have to challenge. I mean, we're going to have to step up. Um, I would like to deviate a little bit because I think it's necessary. People who haven't lived in the '60s, who didn't grow up in the '60s, don't understand what the movement was all about. There, the movement back when Dr. King was fighting for our civil and human rights, that movement was run by kids. The Southern Leadership Council, SNCC. These, if you go back and look at the pictures, these were grade school kids that were out there getting hit by fire hoses and being bitten by dogs in some cases. Those kids basically were the ones that basically turned a lot of the cards on the civil rights movement. Come forward about 50 years. Look at the makeup of the kids that are on the street right now. It's not just the black kids. It's the white kids. It's the Latinx kids. It's the Asian kids, and they're all telling us something. They're telling us they're tired of what's going on out here. They don't appreciate the fact that their future doesn't look as bright, and they're talking about social justice. Uh, we we need to listen to what's going on because this is a turning point. This whole thing with George Floyd is a turning point, but it's not. It's going to be interesting to see what happens from this. I think Steve's right. That if you hadn't had the camera, you'd have never believed it or never thought anything about it. But the bottom line is this is going to be a turning point in our world, and these kids are going to be stepping to the forefront just like the kids did back in the '60s.
Lots of companies are accused of tokenism. How do you think that we can achieve true representation so that action really does take place in a positive way?
Tanya, all I can say is we as a labor organization, we just have to be vigilant. We have to make sure we step up. We need to challenge. We need to make sure that we talk to our members, as Steve said. We need to make sure that we understand the issues that these folks have on the shop floor. A lot of times, as a representative, you can become somewhat stale if you don't remember your roots. You get into a position and basically you think that basically you know it all, and guess what? You really you don't. So we're going to have to step up and do a better job of communicating with our members, a better job of challenging our employers, a better job of basically talking to each other, because if we don't, then we become irrelevant as well.
Now, let's talk about allies. I've had white friends call me personally and email me and not just say, the state of the world we're in is awful, but how can I help? And that meant a lot to me. What do you think of the growing visibility and voices of white allies in the shop, on the job?
Tanya, you've heard me say this a million times, and I've got a lot of quote unquote white allies, but my quote unquote white allies will get out there and they'll move their feet. I always say to people, you can tell me anything you want, but if your feet ain't moving in the right direction, then basically you're no help to me. And that's what's happening now. Again, if you want to be an ally, if you want to be part of this, you got to step up. You got to start walking. You can tell me anything you want, but if you're not willing to go out and put some skin in the game, then I'll guarantee you one thing: you can't help.
His phone's going off. That's okay. He's taking care of it. But
Yeah.
before you go, what are your plans for retirement? Because you and Steve and all of the retirees out there, you deserve it after all your hard work.
Wow. I guess the reality hit today. They came in, the IT department just kind of cleared my computer today, so I guess the reality just hit. What am I going to do? I have several things that I need to achieve or accomplish. Number one, I need to make sure that I do some of the things around the house that basically I wasn't able to do when I was out running the road. Uh, I'm going to probably be doing the same thing that Steve's doing, checking with the grandkids. My kids and my grandkids all live here with me, so that's why we have the Price compound. We'll be spending a lot of time, in the yard and taking walks and different things like that. Um, it's my intention to take a little time off for me, but I've already been contacted by a few folks asking me to support them in some efforts that they're making. I've been thinking about maybe possibly engaging in the city council here in Bowie. I still got my mom and dad. They're both in their late 80s to go and check on. And just generally right now, Tanya, I'm going to take the time off, I think, and get some things squared away. I've got I need to have a surgery, a hip surgery. But then after that, I think probably we're going to retool. I'm going to look at the goals that I made back in the day before I retired, and I'm going to set some new goals and move forward. And I'll be involved with my union.
Sounds good. We appreciate it, Jim, everything that you've done for the union, and thank you for taking the time out of your first day of retirement to join us and give us some insights.
Not a problem. I tell you what, I've had a good run. It's hard to believe that basically it was just yesterday. I guess I was standing on a street corner in St. Louis on Taylor National as a little kid, and then coming forward now. And if you'd have told me I was going to be able to do what I'm doing right now, I'd told you were crazy. Thanks to the executive council. Thanks to the executive council for believing in me and trusting in me, and to all my friends in Canada, I wish you well, and especially my homies out there in Southern California.
Thank you so much. Jim Price, retired director of the IAM Government Employees Department. Thanks. Well, let us know what you think about everything we've talked about. Join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, and YouTube. We appreciate all of your comments and support. Well, if you want to submit to the IAM's photo newsletter and website contest, the deadline is this Friday, July 3rd. So get those applications in. It's already been extended. That's 2 days away. It's a chance to highlight the work of our local and district lodge communicators. Go to our main website, goiam.org, for more detailed information and for the links to enter the contest. And don't forget, the AFL-CIO constituency group's virtual town halls are coming up. They're still going on. The next one is July 9th for APRI. Apala is July 23rd. Clue is August 6th. And Lockless Virtual Town Hall is scheduled for August 20th. And if radio or podcasting is your preference, check out Labor Radio Net work.org. Now, you can find links to shows produced by the labor movement showcasing working people's voices 24/7. That's the Labor Radio Podcast Network. You can reach it on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Time for a look at this week in labor history. This first one's a big one. On June 28, 1850, machinist Matthew McGuire was born. Many believe he established the first Labor Day. We believe it, and the Department of Labor tells us that it's probable, so we're claiming it. A machinist created Labor Day. On July 3rd, 1835, more than 2,000 workers from 20 textile mills in Paterson, New Jersey, went on strike demanding shorter working hours. Many of them were children. They had been working 13-and-a-half-hour days and wanted to get it down to 11 hours. Employers refused to negotiate and broke the Paterson Silk Workers strike by reducing work hours to 12 during the week and 9 hours on Saturdays. On July 7th, 1949, Al Hayes was sworn in as the new president of the IAM and would go on to serve until his retirement in 1965. And on July 5th, 1962, the IAM fought for and won a $250,000 landmark back pay settlement at Lockheed in Burbank, California. 1,000 members at District 727 had been misclassified by the company, resulting in withheld wages. Well, we may not be meeting weekly at this time anymore, but there are so many ways to stay informed about Machinist Union news. Keep checking iMail twice a week via email. It is delivered to your inbox Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. And don't forget, the summer edition of the IAM Journal is online. There are links for both on our website, goiam.org. And keep checking our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube feeds along with Instagram. And thanks to all of you who send us story ideas. We're so grateful for your support of Activate Live over the past nearly 3 years. It was the Director of Communications, Bob Wood, who came up with this idea, and we are so grateful that you have joined this journey with us. So be safe, be well, and continue to be active in your union. Have a happy 4th of July, however you choose to celebrate.